Perfect. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. Let's get started with our presentation. Today, we are going to talk about security. And first, let's get introduced to each other. So my name is Regina. This is Kevin, my colleague. We both work at SRLabs. And basically, this talk is about how we have been keeping the Polkadot ecosystem secure as trusted advisors in the past years. So before we start with the presentation, I want to give you a really bad example of what could happen if you may neglect security or you don't configure your palettes in a secure way. So let's take the example here of SRChain, which is a hypothetical parachain. So it's not live, it's not an existing project, it's just for our example. SRChain is currently experiencing a downtime. Block production has stopped in the past few hours. The team is in panic mode. They don't know what caused the issue. It could have been active exploitation. It could have been just a bug that got triggered. Basically, the token price has dropped significantly in the past hours, and basically, people don't know what is happening. So this is a scenario that none of you would want to end up as. So let's see the potential root cause for such an issue. In this case, in this example, this is a misconfiguration issue with the elections palette. So of course, the elections palette is implementing a function of democracy. And in a democratic system, the more people participating, the more democratic your system is. So in its way, it's a good thing. However, in a blockchain, you also have limited resources. You have limited execution time. And if you have a number of voters that is already pretty high, and if you allow a voter to vote for more than one person or more than one candidate, this can significantly blow up once you try to calculate the election result. So this can also mean that this calculation doesn't fit into your block execution time, which will make your validators or collators miss their slot and could cause such a timeout. So in this case, this bug we found a couple of months ago. We responsibly disclosed it to Parity, who then disclosed it to the ecosystem and showed a way forward, basically how to configure this palette securely. We, of course, did not only find this one bug, we have many more that the team has already mitigated or are working on to fix, and we will show you a couple of more examples. So now let's get started with our talk. So first, I'm going to walk you through some kind of basic threat ideas for the ecosystem that could apply to Polkadot and parachains. Then I will discuss our methodology in detail. And then I will give the word to Kevin, who will walk you through some more concrete examples of bugs that we typically find. And then we will close with some best practices. So let's get started. First, we want to talk about integrity. So if you are building a blockchain project, you want to ensure that your blockchain is trustworthy and reliable. If a user wants to do certain actions or transactions, they expect them to be executed in a way that, you know, how it's supposed to be. So, for example, some ways to undermine the integrity of a blockchain, it could be that you apply some vesting periods to your token holders. If a malicious token holder can somehow break this vesting schedule and just, you know, spend the tokens earlier than intended, of course, this breaks the integrity. Another thing that we will also explain a little bit later is a censorship attack. So if you have a sort of trusted validation or collators, you don't want them to start censoring your transactions, maybe selecting the one or rearranging via priority, because this can also directly break the integrity. They can also use it to do front-running attacks, which we also want to avoid here. Another important aspect is the availability of your blockchain. So of course, if you have an application, you want your users to be able to use it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And basically, if that doesn't happen, it causes annoyance. Maybe people use a different platform. And it's basically just not a nice user experience, not be able to do your normal way of operations. Some examples, what could undermine the availability of the blockchain, for example, wrong weight calculation, which kind of points to a similar direction of the bug that I already explained. But another example is, for example, runtime panics that Kevin will explain in detail later. So now let's move on towards our methodology. So not surprisingly, basically the first thing that we start when you start to assess a new blockchain project is threat modeling. So we found that this is the most efficient way to find really relevant bugs for an application, because we really have to understand what they are trying to accomplish there, and then basically put ourselves into the hacker's boots, so to speak, and try to understand what do they want to undermine here, what do they want to gain from attacking this system. Is it the availability? Maybe they want to have some financial gains, maybe they just want to undermine the reputation. So basically this is the very first thing that we start with when we do an assessment. The second thing is the design verification. So as a second step, we get deeper into the documentation of the blockchain project, try to understand if they already thought about some threat scenarios, maybe as a protocol design, they are already by default mitigating against them, and we have to see if this is sufficient or not. The third step is the checking phase or the hacking phase. So here we actually get deep into the code, we do manual code analysis, and we also have some helping tools in the like specifically fuzzing and static analysis. We will also talk about it a little bit later. And finally, we also help the team through the remediation process. So, of course, we discover a number of bugs, normally for every project. Of course, we don't leave the team hanging there, because we want to make sure that the mitigation that they implement for these bugs are actually fixing the bugs, and also that they are not introducing new bugs, which is sometimes the case, but fortunately not so many times. Now, so I talked about this four-step process. As you can see, this is something that you cannot really imagine we can perform within a day or within even a week. So this is something that takes months. Like we normally take 2 months to do this. This also means for the whole ecosystem, like you see the two of us here at SRLabs, we have a team of 8. This doesn't really scale well for, all the 42 parachains plus Polkadot. So basically what we do also to have a bigger impact on the ecosystem is participating in the Substrate Builders program, not as a participant, but as a provider. So basically we do security assessments for all the parachains that are getting onboarded on Polkadot. And we also are able to find a lot of bugs there. So here you see on this slide the 5 most common bug types that we identify via our SBP assessment. And as you can see, they also already cover the availability and the integrity aspects. Now, what is the difference between SBP? First of all, we don't have so much time because there are a lot of teams. So basically, all these assessments just take 1 week instead of several months. So here we focus on dynamic and static analysis. And of course, this is way less work. We skip the threat modeling, we skip the design verification. We also skip manual code review. So we are not able to find logic bugs, which can be the most relevant because they will directly follow our threat model. But it's still really a valuable step if somebody is building a blockchain project, and we really encourage everybody to go through it. So how does it work? Basically, we receive the scope details in a private channel, what is the target repository, the target runtime, the revision, and then we configure our fuzzer, we run it against the target code base, optimize it throughout the week, and then we also perform some static analysis. And then, of course, if we find some bugs, we immediately report them to the parachain team who can then fix them. And as you can see, we worked with most of the parachains that are live currently at Polkadot, which is also great. So in this next slide, you can see all the bugs run down by category that we have identified since we participate in SBP, which is over the past year and a half. As you can see, benchmarking seems to be the most common issue. Please do your benchmarking if you are planning to participate in SBP, because it's super important. We think that one root cause could be that this is the last step during your development process, and we might perform the security analysis before you get to do your benchmarking. But nevertheless, this is a very important step also for security. Other typical issues are arithmetic issues, for example, unsafe math. And then there is recently a trend of reachable panic issues, which is a trend that we do not advise you to follow. But with this one, I will give it to Kevin, who will talk about the panic issues further.
Thank you. So yeah, let's go through some impactful bugs now, a little bit more inside the technique. So Regina said we want a chain basically to be available 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. It makes sense for all technology, but specifically that one, right? So the way that the collectors work inside the Polkadot ecosystem and with the parachain is that they can communicate with each other. Now, the problem is that if an attacker, a malicious entity, is at some point able to craft an extrinsic and a malicious extrinsic and send it to a collator, this collector might, depending on the bug, crash because of a panic, and then this will be spread all over the collators, right? So this obviously, it has consequences for everyone. The users first, the user might not be able to operate with the blockchain anymore. Whatever, if it's with a browser extension, if it's with mobile application, there might be some delays also. Obviously, there is consequences for the parachain and the dev, because these kind of bugs take some time to be fixed. You need to find where the bug is. You need to find how to fix it. Once you fix it, if there is no collateral damages, and then you need to commit, push everything, tell every participant of the network to update the code base and so on. So it takes a lot of time. And now, just to finish on that slide, there is an interesting case where if the attacker is the collector, is one of the collector, he might just change his code, and then he fix the code himself or put some kind of configuration to his runtime. So then he won't be affected by the malicious extrinsic, and then not only will have some availability problem, but also some integrity, because he might be able to perform some kind of malicious, some kind of censorship attacks. So a very basic way, and the most critical one we see to really kill this availability is with the unwrap function, for example. So if an unwrap is triggered and return unknown, for all the devs here, you know this probably already, it will basically crash. In Substrate, it will panic and so crash. That's a decision made also by the language, is that we prefer to have a program to crash instead of having a value that doesn't make sense, right? So here you can see in that example, we do a multiplication and we realize, oh, actually it goes a little bit out of the boundaries in terms of memory allocation. So what we do, we crash. And that is something that we need to avoid. Now, this was for the availability. There is also bugs for integrity. So this one is a little bit more technical. Before, I will just spend some time explaining why randomization is quite useful in those cases, because the next bug you will see it will be about randomization. So we can use randomization for a lot of cases. The first one is, let's imagine, for example, a scenario where a parachain wants to select some users, and then for users, to receive an airdrop. Now, if someone is able to predict or to impact the random number at some point, he might be able to, I don't know, predict who's going to win. And obviously, this has some bad impact. Also, you can use randomness for the collector selection. And we don't want to be able to predict who is going to be the next collator, because then we might just dose the collator, which might be an issue. So we found a few months ago an issue with the random collective flick palette. So this palette is used to manage everything about randomization. And the way it works is that it will calculate a random number for the previous block based on the block hash of the 81 previous block plus the current block hash. Now, the problem with this is that if at some point someone is able to, with enough energy and resources, to rearrange the extrinsic and to calculate this hash, then he might be able, with a certain threshold and probability, to predict this number. So then, obviously, not only can predict, but also maybe influence this number. So now, we would like to explain maybe some best practices that every team should be aware of. The first one, Regina mentioned it already, it's about the benchmarking. Don't forget to do the benchmarking at the end of each milestone, right? Like most frequently as possible, because a lot of time we see a lack of good benchmarking. And this can have some bad effect on the chain, and also for the users. Also, something good to have in mind is to use some storage deposit. Why? Basically, just to provide the economical incentive to the users to clean up the storage after using it, right? So if we lock a little bit of token from the user and we tell him, okay, you will get this money back once you remove some data, then it's better not only for the storage but for everyone. Also, try avoid to use raw mathematical function like the plus multiplied, and because then this might have some impacts, integrity and availability bugs. And for this, Rust provides some functions that manage everything like with overflowing, underflowing, and all these kind of issues. And finally, obviously, avoid as much as possible using functions like unwrap or expect everything that might trigger at some point and a panic into the runtime. Yeah. So I will finish this this presentation by getting some more abstracted best practices related to the security of every product. So the first one is try to do as much as possible some security audits. And not only with one security provider, right? Try to use different one because each security firm has its own way of thinking, its own way of, like its own methodology. So then the more you diversify, the better. Also, for the devs, try to think about all the edge cases when you code something. When you implement a feature, try to think as maybe a parrot, a malicious entity that would like really to have a bad impact or whatever on the chain. Try to think a bit out of the box. And finally, use bug bounty, make bug bounty. It's cool for us. I mean, not for us, but for colleagues, white hats. And it's also cool for the community because it shows that you pay attention to the security. We all know how important it is in the crypto ecosystem, and it's better for everyone. So we use some fuzzing tools. We slightly talked about it before. A part of it is already open source. You can go to this Git here and see how it looks like. We are planning to open source more things in the future. But yeah, for now you can just go here and try to use it, improve it as much as you can, give some feedback, share some issues, and yeah, that's it. Feel free if you have any question.